2023 has come and gone, and man, what a great year for game releases. Hey there guys, I know it's been a bit since I've been here, but I'm hoping to stick around a bit longer with a few creative projects every now and then, with this being one of them. Just like many other videos that get released around this time of year, this is just my personal list of my favorite games of 2023. Before we get into it though, I did want to give two disclaimers. Number one, there will be spoilers in this video for certain games. Any spoilers I show, I've tried to make very brief, but there will be footage of a few final bosses and talking about some endings as well. But just in case if you don't want to get spoiled, I've left timestamps in the description below if all you care about is the list. And number two, throughout this video I've tried my best to record all the footage for each section, but due to time constraints and my personal life being very busy at the moment, I've had to use other people's footage in this video. I've tried my absolute best to make sure the split is no more than 80% of it being my footage and the other 20% being another person's. But I've done my best to credit them, and I will leave a link to their channel in the description below. Anything I say in this video is solely my opinion and is only to promote discussion and express my love for these games. On top of that, while this video remains on YouTube, I will never monetize it, as I feel that's the right thing to do. So with all that out of the way, let's get into it. These are my top 10 games of 2023. Starting off at number 10 is Master Detective Archives Rain Code. I happened to come across this game by pure chance when it came out. You ever have a moment where you're watching a friend play a game and think, hey, this looks pretty cool? That's essentially what happened here. I saw a friend going through the first mystery labyrinth and thought, oh, this looks like Ace Attorney mixed with Persona 5. Next you tell me this is from Spike Chunsoft, the same company that brought us the Zero Escape series? Well then, sign me up! It took a little bit for the story to fully hook me, but after that first initial chapter, I was on board for the rest of the game. Rain Code is essentially the next in line from the Danganronpa team, so if you've played that series, I imagine you'll fit right at home here. I haven't played those games personally, but after finishing this, it does have me at least interested to check them out. In Rain Code, you play as Yuma Cocohead, tasked with finding out the mystery of Kane Ward's ultimate secret, with the help of a death god named Shinigami by conquering the mystery labyrinth, as well as other detectives from the WDO. Getting to interact with this world and its characters was to me the highlight of the experience. There's tons of side quests that expand more on the world and the dealings of Amaterasu Corporation and how it affects its citizens, as well as gabs with the other detectives that let you get to know the rest of the cast.
I have lived inside a mansion since I was young, and know little about the ways of the world. I am so naive that the servants call me Dummy Thick behind my back.
I don't think that's what they meant.
Shinigami easily ended up being my favorite with her constant teasing of Yuma and the other detectives at the agency, and also has some of the best moments of the story. The world and music really pulls you in with its aesthetic. The soundtrack actually landed in my top 5 of this year thanks to it blending perfectly with the vibe the game is going for. I love Kane Ward's Japanese cyberpunk vibe so much. Having just recently finished Cyberpunk 2077, I think this invokes that same feeling as Night City sometimes, but with a lot more rain. The things that hold this game back though from being higher on the list is mainly the mystery labyrinth sections. While the first time is really cool embracing the idea of something like a palace from Persona 5, there's only one type of labyrinth and after a while it feels too samey. The minigames don't change that much as you're unraveling the mystery, and most of the time just rely on a quick time event or just guessing until you get the answer right. There are these reasoning battles that are similar to a debate from Danganronpa, but these are so easy and messing up doesn't really have any penalty, making the rankings you receive at the end of the labyrinth next to pointless. The only time these get any kind of challenging is near the end of the game when there's more do or die moments. Outside of that, you're holding forward a lot while the characters discuss the case that you're on. And earlier I did say I did like the characters, but there were a couple of members of the cast I didn't care for. Desuhiko made me laugh more just because of what he said, but he got pretty annoying by the middle of case 2. And Vivia's constant I wanna die shtick got annoying really fast. Not to mention the performance during these sections. I played this game within the first month of it being released, and while it has gotten better with patches, I really hope we can see an improved version on other consoles or PC, because it feels like the Switch is holding the game back a bit. I really do hope we get to see a sequel sometime in the future, because I'd love to see more of Yuma's adventures and would like to see more variety in the mystery labyrinths if they decide to bring those back. Number 9 is Super Mario Wonder. A great return to 2D Mario and one of his best outings since Mario World. I haven't played a platformer with this much charm since Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze. Every level feels like it was expertly handcrafted to where honestly I didn't come across too much in terms of levels I outright hated compared to other 2D games I've played. Every character feels so good to control with little to no differences between them unfortunately, but when the levels are designed this good, it's honestly hard to get upset about that. Not to mention all the different badges you can try out to fit a playstyle you prefer. Honestly, one of my favorite things is that this game lets you even pick the broken characters and they still count towards completion. So if you've got a level that's giving you trouble, no shame in pulling them out to help you get that out of the way, and if you don't want to use them, it's no big deal. I think my favorite thing about this game though has to be the flower. I'm usually not a fan of characters that just make simple remarks at the situation you're in, but these guys never once felt annoying and made me chuckle more than once. Speaking of which, the new actors from Mario & Company all sound fantastic, and if this is how they're going to sound going forward, I'm all for it. This was also one of the first 2D Mario games I did try out the co-op thanks to the online mode, and I really liked it. I like how you don't have to worry about messing up your jumps like in the new series if you hit another player, and the screen doesn't jump to a random player when they get ahead of you, the way the online in this kind of game should work. My biggest gripe with Wonder though is that for how great each level feels to play, the same can't be said for the bosses, outside the final boss, and that's only because I love his theme. Also, these purple coins that are in every level feel really pointless. You can buy lives in item shops, but lives at this point in games don't really feel like they add anything or take anything away if you remove them altogether. After a while, you collect so many of them that besides buying standees in this gacha style item minigame, there's really no point in doing it. I prefer to have something like the star coins come back where it feels more worth collecting to open up more levels like in the challenge world. Wonder may not break into my top 5 favorite 2D platformers of all time, but it is one worth checking out if you haven't already. I feel like I'm cheating a bit here, but oh well, it's my list. Number 8 is Xenoblade Chronicles 3 Future Redeemed. Fun fact, Xenoblade 3 was my game of the year of 2022, so it only makes sense that the DLC expansion lands somewhere on this list too. Future Redeemed is a prequel story for Xenoblade 3, but also serves as the finale for the Xenoblade saga, for now. Bringing back some of my favorite things from Xenoblade 1 and 2, and then bringing in systems from 3's combat, you couldn't ask for a better combination. It's great to see Rex and Shulk again as they team up with this game's new protagonists, Matthew and A, and some new characters like Glitter and Nicole. I'm always a sucker for bringing back characters we get to see at one point in their life, and then they come back much older and wiser, and the fact that we get 2 favorites from both 1 and 2, yes, please! I screamed in pure joy seeing Rex pop up being a cool badass uncle and seeing Shulk as a leader of his own colony. The other characters don't hold them back at all, and some landed in my personal favorites among the series like Matthew and A with their interactions. The story takes advantage of the setting and lets us get to know the new cast, and also how they bounce off each other in their heart-to-hearts that just make these characters feel more alive and give us closure to a few things that have been talked about in previous games. Now, with this being a Xenoblade game, I gotta mention the music. Just like Raincoat, this game's soundtrack landed near my top of this year. We get remixes of older songs with beautiful new scores that fit right in with the rest of the series. The battle theme in particular being one of, if not my favorite now in the series. I think the only thing that holds this game back from being higher is just wanting this expansion to be its own game that complements 3 kind of like a Xenoblade Chronicles 3-2. Because of it being a prequel, I feel there's more that could be explained within the world of Xenoblade 3 that help tie up more loose ends by the end of that game. I also would have liked more of a backstory for the other main characters from Xenoblade 1 and 2, and to find out what happened to them instead of it just being left up to interpretation. That's more of a me thing, I know, but I also like to have closure and clarity for my stories because this is likely the last time we were ever going to see these characters. I also wanted more of this world to explore because 3's world, while not bad, it didn't grab me as much as All Rest or The Bionicst, and now we have a way to help complement it with these characters from both of those worlds, but it doesn't feel big enough for a Xenoblade experience. Also, while this may be based off more of 3's combat, some characters are just clearly better than others. There's a reason that Double Spinning Edge became a meme from this game because of just how easy it is to get killed because of it. Nicole is just not a good tank compared to Shulk, at least in my experience, where I just had him more as a meat shield while Shulk acted as the main tank. I'm glad chain attack combinations are back and they are just as fun to pull off as they were in 3 with awesome team ups depending on how you end it. I would say out of the 3 expansions each Xenoblade game has gotten, Future Redeemed is easily the best and one of my favorites in the series. Here's the hope that the next project from Monolith will be able to give us an experience even greater or on par with this massive saga with its larger than life characters and world to match that experience. I think next to Mario, this is likely going to be a hot take. At number 7, I'm placing Spider-Man 2. The original 2018 game is one of my favorites made by Insomniac and is my favorite superhero game ever made. So for the sequel, I had pretty high expectations, but it didn't quite hit the same notes as the first game or Miles. First, let me start by saying from a gameplay perspective, this is an improvement to the original and Miles in almost every single way. Traversal and combat have been refined to be more snappy and satisfying to pull off. I love the new web wings and how they feel like a natural extension of web slinging and let you get so much speed in such a short amount of time. From there, it becomes how long can you keep the pace going, and it never gets old. Combat takes a page out of Miles' notebook, and now both Peter and Miles have different super moves along with 4 gadgets that make combat much more dynamic with great animations and fun challenges that put your kit to work. I think Insomniac knew this too and made this game much more difficult than the last two, making it feel more rewarding playing on higher difficulties. Stealth sections have gotten a total rework thanks to the new enemy types taking advantage of their abilities and making you think about how you need to take them down without alerting others. I love how crimes now don't just feel like a grind when going after these optional objectives, and now they just play a part in unlocking more stuff, which in my opinion is how it should have been from the first game. The new side stories involving the collectibles and characters were great in fleshing out secondary plot elements and honestly led to some of my favorite character moments in the story. And while some people may not like them, I really like the new science puzzles and MJ sections this time around. They felt like a natural evolution, and I hope they improve these further in the future if they decide to bring them back. The new villains and bosses this time around are truly a highlight of the entire story, which overall felt like a great continuation from the first game in Miles. Kraven is genuinely threatening on screen, as well as Venom for as little as he appears in the game, but this also leads to my biggest issue with the game overall. I'm not sure what they were going for here exactly, but Kraven killing off almost every single villain from the first game didn't sit right with me. It felt like it was a way to make him more threatening, but in doing so, a lot of the iconic villains from Spider-Man's history are now just gone. Venom is truly a highlight of the story, but the entire third act feels so rushed it loses so much impact by the end. Certain characters are also just completely rewritten with no explanation as far as I can find, like with Black Cat just being completely written out of the plot when she had an entire DLC dedicated to her and she remained in it throughout the City That Never Sleeps story. Tombstone is now a good guy when in the first game after defeating him he said,
"Too much to hope you'll be taking it easier now that you're, mortal?"
Not a chance. Threat of death just ups the thrill.
Also, I love Miles in this continuity, but I am so mixed on his storyline in this game. I get what they're going for, but when it's compared to the rest of the story, it just doesn't fit right. I'm not against how the story went, but it feels like Insomniac was restricted in telling the symbiote story a certain way, and it holds the overall game back because it feels like it needed another pass. I really do love this universe and what they've created, as it's become one of my favorite Spider-Man continuities in recent history, but I really do hope the next game can bring that same energy that the first game brought back in 2018 and land among the best in the superhero genre. At this point, every game is literally only like a point difference in how I'd rank it. People say that 2023 was one of the best years for game releases, and this is where I feel that. You ever have a game that gives you an experience that you completely forgot about? That's exactly what number 6, Sea of Stars, did to me. One of my favorite games of all time is Chrono Trigger, and upon starting Sea of Stars, it reminded me of that feeling I had, and I didn't know I had missed it so much. The characters, the world, combat, the music, it all just hits the right areas. Zale, Valere, and Garl have such a great dynamic with each other that for as short as the game is, they stick with you. This is one of those games I don't want to give too much away, but I can say the entire cast is great outside the main trio and really help bring this world to life. Speaking of, the world is filled with lore to explore and discover, and getting to learn about it is very fun. For a game inspired by classic JRPGs, my expectations for traversal isn't as big as it was, but they managed to shatter those by giving us different options from a hook shot, being able to climb walls, swim, and much more. Combat feels like a combination between Mario and Luigi and Chrono Trigger and gives us a satisfying system that starts off pretty simple, but evolves into something much more as you attempt to interrupt enemy combos to either nullify the damage or stop the attack completely. The bosses take full advantage of this idea, bringing back that feeling of fighting Magus or Othros for the first time with the amazing backgrounds and music. I've mentioned the music a bit already, but seriously, Sea of Stars' soundtrack is just beautiful. The moment I heard heard Yasunori Mitsuda was guest composed in a few songs, I was hooked. The first song I encountered that he composed, I nearly cried because I forgot just how good of a composer he is, and after all these years, he's still one of my personal favorite composers. Eric Brown and the rest of the team also nailed every bit of music. I hear that some of the soundtrack is remixes from The Messenger, but I haven't played that game very much, so a lot of these songs was my first time hearing them. Regardless of that, Sea of Stars' soundtrack easily lands in my favorites of this year. One thing I really love that games do when they want you to get into a world is to create some kind of minigame that feels like it's unique to that world. Valhalla had Orlog, although that could also be a real game, I'm not too sure about that, and Final Fantasy has Triple Triad. Sea of Stars has Wheels, a simple minigame with lots of strategy that's very fun, and outside the first match, mainly because of your starting hand, was very fun to learn and master, to where I beat every opponent in the game that was optional because I loved it that much. With that being said though, as much as I love this game, the only thing that holds it back honestly is just getting the true ending. The game is so good up until this point that when attempting to do this, it feels like hitting a brick wall, and I wish you could do it all from the get-go. You can do most of the objectives, but you still have to finish the game normally, and then afterwards go around and collect items that unlock the true ending. The worst one easily being the rainbow shells. I've played games before that to get the true ending is a giant pain in the ass, with Bravely Default 1 being the example of what not to do, and these rainbow shells are it for this game. There are 40 of them, and just playing normally and exploring, I found a good 20-ish of them. But even with some items that can help track them down, they're still incredibly tedious because you still have to find them in the levels you visit. Luckily, there are guides on YouTube that help make this easier, but I really hate this idea of having to comb through a YouTube video just to find this one thing to get a secret ending that in my opinion is worth it. It just sucks that this one thing sours the final moments of the story of an otherwise great experience. And while I do love the story as a whole, it does feel like it's playing a bigger homage to The Messenger, because there were some story moments that feel like they would hit a bit more if I had played that first. And while I may love the entire cast, there are some that are clearly more important than others and don't get fleshed out as much. Maybe I just need to play The Messenger at this point to see what happens in the future of this world, but regardless of all that, Sea of Stars is a game you can jump into without any knowledge of its sequel, and I always appreciate since that type of game is more up my alley than something like The Messenger. Sabotage Studio managed to make a game I cherish, and I really hope at some point they can make a game like this again, because I feel there's more there with a tighter narrative and a more expanded combat that could land among the greatest JRPG style games to ever come out. If you love these type of games at all, please do not sleep on this. You owe it to yourself to try it out at some point. Better late than never, eh, Nintendo? Number 5 is Pikmin 4. Jeez, how long have we waited for this game? Nearly a decade? But you know what? That wait was worth it. I'm a huge Pikmin fan. Started with the remake on Wii and never looked back. Pikmin 4 I was very nervous about because as much as I love the series, I really don't like 2, which is what this game was in the style of. But then I finally played it on release and all that worry went away. This is one of the best handcrafted games Nintendo has ever released. Everything from 2 has been fixed. Dungeons have actual level design and don't rely on randomly generated bullshit that's more frustrating than fair. Pikmin AI is the best it's ever been, and every Pikmin type is returning. The new night maps have this awesome tower defense mode that fits perfectly within Pikmin's playstyle. Everything in this game just works together so well. Not only that, but this is easily, in my opinion, not only one of the best looking games on Switch, but also of this generation. I don't know what black magic sorcery they put into this series, but everything just looks and feels right. By far, one of my favorite new gameplay additions is Ochi. 2023 has been the year of dogs in games, and Ochi is among the bestest of boys. While ditching the idea of multiple captains like 2 and 3, Ochi is that, but also another tool like the Pikmin, and the game takes full advantage of it, and it doesn't break any kind of challenge the game throws at you for the most part. I do think the chargeability was a little broken, but Pikmin, when it's designed right, has never been that challenging because it's about utilizing your toolkit to handle the situation at hand, and this game gives you so many different options on how to approach objectives. It's one of the reasons I love replaying this series as much as I do. Pikmin 1 and 3 I've beaten over 10 times throughout my life because of this idea alone, and 4 lets me do that and then some, to where I've completed this game 4 times already this year, more than any other game that's on this list. For Pikmin 1 fans, the post game has a mode called Olimar's Tale, where not only do we get to play as Olimar for a bit, it feels like a full upscale remake of Pikmin 1 in the style of Pikmin 4, and that's just a bonus. I loved this mode a lot, to put it lightly, and honestly was my favorite thing to do in 4. Dandori mode is by far the most addicting challenge mode the series has ever had. I absolutely love trying to reach max rank on every level by collecting every piece of treasure during these, and it really helps you learn how more of the game's mechanics work, and you feel like a master when completing them. Minus the stage of the Leaf Trials, every Dandori challenge is a treat. I didn't like these as much because while some of them were fine and really put you to the test, this one can just fuck right off because it goes against the game's systems and clearing it was not fun. And while the caves are definitely a big upgrade compared to 2, I wish there was more variety, but for what we get, I'd rather have levels I recognize and love than ones I remember that can have really bad RNG. There's very few things I don't like about this game, the big thing being to get all the upgrades you will have to grind. My favorite thing about Pikmin games like 1 and 3 is seeing how fast you can complete a stage or playthrough thanks to knowing how the game mechanics work and being as efficient as possible. Trying to do that in 4, I haven't found a way to do this yet. When I am being as efficient as possible, I'm still shy of upgrading by a fair amount and have to spend about 5 to 8 days in-game grinding up materials just to get the rest of the upgrades. I get why they did it too because there are so many Pikmin types, but I really wish they would update the game to make it to where you can have more than 3 types on the field at any time. Maybe put in a harder difficulty mode like Pikmin 3 Deluxe that lets you do that, but limit the amount of Pikmin that you can have on the field. Also, having Louis as the villain again for like the 3rd time just feels It's not that Pikmin has ever been about having a dastardly villain, but I really just don't like him. He's not funny and he never seems to get punished for his actions, making it more annoying that he keeps popping up like he usually does. Also, while I do love the Dandori challenges, I really wish the mandatory Dandori battles weren't split screen. There really isn't a point to it. They could easily have a thing on the screen that shows what the opponent is doing or what they're carrying back to their base. And while this may be called Pikmin 4, I really wish this was a proper sequel rather than a retelling of Pikmin 1 and bits of 2. But then again, Pikmin to me has never been about the plot, it's been the gameplay, and while I still prefer the style of Pikmin 1 and 3, 4 is a very good addition to the series where honestly between Pikmin 3 and 4, I have a tough time deciding which I like more. I do hope Nintendo sees that Pikmin is worth keeping around a bit more because if there is a Pikmin 5, I'd love for them to go back to that style, and then maybe go back to 2 and 4 style for Pikmin 6. But that's probably like 20 years from now knowing the release schedule for this series, but only time will tell. Fun fact, every game from here on in made me cry at some point in 2023. Arguably the one that did it the most was number 4, Like a Dragon Gaiden. It is absolutely no secret how much I love this franchise. Gaiden finally brings Kiryu back into the limelight since 6, and it's so good to see him again. One of my biggest fears after seeing this game announced around the time 8 was getting teased was that this game and 8 would try to retconning 6's ending, which is one of my favorite video game endings of all time, and I really didn't want the emotions I felt during that time to feel invalid. Luckily, Gaiden understood what to do, and it feels like a natural continuation of 6's ending. What blows my mind the most is that originally this was going to be DLC, but they decided to make it a full-on game within 6 months. I hope at least the developers weren't crunched for time, because this game certainly doesn't feel like it at all. It's one of the shorter games in this franchise, but with a story and gameplay that rivals 6 and parts of 0, Gaiden managed to become one of the best games in the franchise. First off, the combat is the best it's felt in years. I never minded the Dragon Engine games, but they've never never top Zero as my personal favorite combat style in the series, Yakuza's style feels like a combination of Dragon style but also mixed with Rush and Brawler. It feels so smooth being able to do moves I'm used to doing with this moveset, but now they're all mixed together. Agent style, though, has easily become my second favorite in the series history. Having all these gadgets at your disposal and how funny they make combat encounters never failed to make me laugh. Also, bringing back a lot of older minigames is such a joy, and they are just as great as they've always been. Now, if we can just get bowling from 0 and 5, we'll be back in business. On top of that, we have new and old karaoke tracks and remixes of some of my favorite ones from Ishin. Sayonara Silent Night is going to remain to me a Christmas classic for years to come. I've also got to mention not just Akami's beautiful performance in Like a Butterfly, but also the whole game. With as long as the series has been going, when a new side character gets introduced, it can be hit or miss whether or not they leave a lasting impression, and Akami is easily one of the best characters they've introduced in a long time. She just has this energy that makes her so likable and funny that plays great off of Kiryu's personality. She's also the one managing this game's sub-stories, and they're just as fantastic as always. You have ones ranging from a ChatGPT parody to finding 7 balls around Osaka to get Shenlong's pants, to one involving a certain gorilla that made me super happy to see referenced. I think the most impressive thing Gaiden has, though, has to be the castle. Basically the playground of this game, where you can dress Kiryu up in different outfits, and as a Final Fantasy XIV enjoyer, glamour is the true endgame of any game. I love this, and really want this to become a staple in later games. You can make some really goofy outfits, and the best part is that they're all reflected in most of the cutscenes as well. Arguably the biggest thing in Gaiden, though, is the new Coliseum located here, because holy crap, I don't know what RGG was smoking, but they basically took a page out of Super Smash Bros. And said, everyone is here. You have the typical 1v1 matches like in the past, but then I guess wanting to fix the Kiryu clan from 6 and Majima construction from Kiwami 2, they just decided, let's just do an all-out brawl with everyone on screen. It creates this giant mess of characters throwing hands at each other with hilarious ragdoll physics, and I love it. The best part, though, is that you can control literally any character you can recruit now. So you want to play as Chicken Man from Yakuza 7? You can. You want to play as Gary Buster Holmes? You can. You want to play as Benny Ryuji? You can. This mode alone makes this the best Coliseum mode in the entire franchise. I usually do these for the sub-stories in other games, but in Gaiden, I just loved experimenting with all the different characters and playstyles on offer. The Cabaret Club is finally back, and I've seen these divisive online. Instead of using the model of the character's likeness, Gaiden uses full FMVs of the actresses responding to answers to the conversations you have with them, including special days you max out their affection rank. I can understand if this is something that people may not like or don't feel comfortable about, but I just see this as an evolution of sorts that RGG wanted to try out. I don't think they'll stick with this style going forward, but on paper, I think the idea is an interesting take. The Cabaret Club minigame has been a staple of the series for such a long time that I don't think they'll ever cut it, but outside of one time during the main story, you never have to touch it again if you really don't want to. After all this praise, though, I gotta talk about the biggest thing that affected me the most, and that was easily the ending of this game. Just when I thought Yakuza 6 was the game that made me cry the hardest in the series, Gaiden comes in and reenacts that JoJo meme and kicks me while I'm already down. Kiryu is one of my favorite characters in fiction, and his journey is something that feels like a reward as you play through the series. Seeing him start as a Yakuza grunt to wanting to support his family by the end of 6, but due to circumstances he had to give up his own happiness for his own. One thing I wish 7 had done when we saw Kiryu was how he felt about this personally, and this ending fully displays that. RGG said multiple times that you will get to know Kiryu in Gaiden if you haven't played the other games, and while I won't deny that, I would say it won't hit as hard unless you have played all the games. You can certainly play this game after 7, or if you just want to get into it, I don't think it's a bad start honestly, but it's getting to know the characters and how they grow throughout the journey that makes this game's ending so special to me. I do think $50 is a bit much, mainly because this game is digital only in the West and I had to import a physical copy just so I could have one. But even if this game did start as planned DLC, it certainly didn't feel like it and made a lasting impression on me.
Rides over, lovebirds, home sweet home.
This was really hard to find where to put this at, but ultimately, Final Fantasy XVI landed at number 3. I remember when this game was announced and that a lot of developers from Final Fantasy XIV were going to be working on it, and that alone told me that we were going to be in for a good time. I've said it before, but Final Fantasy XIV is a very important game to me. I've put over thousands of hours into it over the years, and that team has delivered some of the best video game moments I've experienced with a soundtrack to boot. So combining the composer of 14, Masayoshi Soken, the writer from Heavensward, and the combat designer from Devil May Cry 5, and to top it off with Yoshi P, the producer and director of 14, how could I not be hyped? I decided to go into this game as blind as possible, and I'm so glad I did. 16 is easily in my top 5 favorite Final Fantasies of all time, next to 4 and 7 Remake. The story and journey of Clive as you follow him throughout being a teenager into his adult life is already a story I can get behind since I love games like Dragon Quest V. In fact, I can say 16's story is my favorite story of 2023. There were so many moments that genuinely made me scream and hype, as well as cry due to how well written the main cast is. Ben Starr as Clive is one of the greatest performances I've ever heard, and I'm so glad he was casted as him. And I can't forget about Jill and Torgal. I said earlier that 2023 was the year of dogs, and Torgal is the best boy. He is so cute in the beginning and remains with you throughout the entire journey, and is also one of the best party members in the game. Jill and Clive's relationship I love seeing progress throughout the story, and they ended up becoming one of my favorite couples in the series history. The rest of the main cast is just pure joy to be around. I love just about every single side character in this game. Sid is an awesome hot grandpa, and Gav always has your back and was one of my favorites as well. But now, I gotta talk about the combat. This, in my opinion, is the second best action-oriented combat in the series. It doesn't beat 7 Remake as my favorite, but it comes close. I absolutely love how customized you can make Clive to match your preferred style with the different icons, with my personal favorites being Phoenix, Titan, and Odin. There's one thing though that can't be understated about the combat, and that's the icon fights. My god, did the team deliver on this front. I remember playing the demo and playing as the Phoenix fighting Ifrit, and while I thought that was pretty cool, that's only the surface level. Every icon fight, minus maybe Garuda, I think stands as the best moments of the game without question. They turn into these massive Dragon Ball Z fights on a scale like no other Final Fantasy game has done outside of a couple of instances I can think of in 15, but unlike 15, these control so much better and just increase the spectacle with every single one to where it feels like how can they make this better, and they just do. If I had to rank them in order, I would put Titan, Bahamut, the final boss, Odin, Typhon, Phoenix, and then Garuda. There is technically one more, but that's more of a QTE moment and not so much a full-on icon fight. In fact, I can easily say 16 had my favorite final boss of 2023. I'm such a sucker for cliche things sometimes, and 2 of my favorite tropes get used. Fighting him with the same abilities that you've collected throughout the journey, and a remix of my favorite song in 2023, and I really want to talk about this part. Soken, I have so much respect for as a composer. This man not only composed for 14, but also this game while battling cancer. Give this man a medal, please, because he fucking deserves it. He really loves to use leitmotifs, and my god does he put that to work in this game's soundtrack. In fact, I can easily say that 16's score is my second favorite soundtrack this year. So, before the game released, there was a song from the trailers they released a full version of called Find the Flame, and hearing it before the game came out made me really excited to see where it was going to play in the game, and it plays at the best time and led to my favorite moment in the entire game. About 8 hours in, Clive has to come face to face with his personal demons. He accepts his mistakes, leading to a boss fight with his dark half, as he takes on his doubts similar to that one part in 4 with Cecil. During this fight, you hear a somber version of the song. It builds up as you continue fighting, and then just when Clive is about to lose, this happens.
No escape, eh? It's all right. I'm done running from you. Together, then. It's time to find out who we are, once and for all. Show yourself, Ifrit.
God damn this part! I wish I could reenact this moment all over again. The symbolism of accepting oneself, the limit break bar from 14, but by far the music drop. I've watched a couple of friends play this part specifically for the first time because this moment is one of those moments you can't replicate the feeling of too often, and I wanted to see if they had the same reaction. The thing that blows my mind is that this isn't the only time something like this happens. The game has so many moments that do this with dropping the music at the perfect time and giving this feeling all over again. My first time though was by far my favorite because of the raw emotion I felt. Seriously, the team nailed feeling the right emotions at the best times. I can't say there's been another game in a long time that's done it as good as this one. These moments, the story, the combat in this game are just so damn good. I really wanted to place it higher than I already did. The only thing that keeps it from being higher is the pacing. Certain plot points can get muddy easily and not make sense unless you consult the in-game's active time lore, which does explain more backstory for certain characters that don't have much screen time, but show up for those big moments in the story. This feature is very good to have, but when the rest of the game is so well acted, so well told through silent moments, and seeing characters act the way they do when something comes up that doesn't make sense feels like it gets in the way. Also, I really did love doing the side quests in this game, but the biggest pace breaker in all of 16 is the side quests at the end of the game. Right before going to fight the final boss, you get bombarded with so many quests and optional hunts, which I did do because the combat was so good and the side quests I genuinely was interested in, but they just dump literally every single side story at once at this specific point, and it's great to see how each subplot gets wrapped up, but to do it all at once instead of being better paced does knock it quite a bit. Also, please tell me I'm not the only one who wishes elemental weaknesses were a thing. It's great the game does let you use whatever element an icon might have with no regard to what enemy you're fighting, but when I think about it like in 7 Remake where using a fire spell heals a fire enemy, it feels really weird it doesn't happen here. Maybe it's more the fact that that's been such an RPG staple in so many other games. I just find it really weird that it's not in 16. This also might be a personal thing, but recently I've been going through the game again on New Game Plus, referred to as Final Fantasy mode, and now that I'm about halfway through it, it feels like the proper difficulty for the game. The enemies hit a lot harder and you have more variety from the start, but you also have your entire toolkit from the base game, and this is where I think the game's combat truly comes together when you have so many options for your playstyle. I'm not saying they needed to give you every ability at the start, but Final Fantasy mode just feels the right way to play, and you can still use the timely accessories just like in the base game. But regardless of all of that, 16 managed to climb its way to the top 3, and I'm so happy to have gone on this journey with Clive and the others, and can only hope the DLC releasing next year lets this game go out with a bang. Oh boy, this is gonna be tough. My runner-up at number 2 is Octopath 2. I will try my best to properly explain because this game is so good. Octopath 1 is a game over the years that hasn't aged the best. It looks great, plays fine, has good voice acting, and of course, I'm going to be incredibly redundant with this point a lot throughout this, the music is phenomenal. The biggest problems that game suffers from, in my opinion, is the pacing, the grinding, and the characters not interacting with each other. I want to bring this up specifically because when Octopath 2 was announced, I didn't care if the game was going to have the same issues or not. I just wanted that soundtrack by Yasunori Nishiki. Octopath 1 music is one of my favorite soundtracks of all time. And now we have a chance to have that same composer come back to give us a whole JRPG's worth of game music. How could I not be excited from that alone? In 2022, they released a sample of 2 songs, Hikari's theme and a battle theme. I listened to these for hours and hours. And even if they weren't the full versions of the songs, I didn't care. I just wanted the soundtrack that badly. Finally, when the demo came out, I listened to every song the game had available and just knew it was going to be everything I wanted and more. I listened to the character themes without looking up anything about them just to decide who I was going to start the game with. I ended up tying between Ochette and Particio, but ended up picking Particio instead, and the rest was history. I just played the first chapter and said, I'm saving this for when it comes out. I didn't want to get spoiled at all for any music piece or the story because Particio's story from the get-go, I was already hooked. And finally, the long-awaited day came when it released. I went through every character's chapter 1 and knew this game wasn't just a good game, it was evolving into one of my favorite RPGs of all time. The music kept getting better with every location. The battle themes, from bosses to normal encounters, just don't sound like normal battle themes. They sound like what you'd expect for a final boss, and it's that caliber for the entire game. The battle theme I heard in 2022 was Critical Clash 2, and that's just the normal boss theme. How the music blends together with the characters before it ramps up into the actual fight music never, ever gets old. After going through the story, every character's theme hits even more thanks to it matching perfectly for them. The town themes are perfect. A Verdant Wind Blows, hearing that for the first time was magical. Every, and I mean every piece of music in this game is just godlike. I've listened to a lot of music from games over the years, but none of them have pushed past my expectations as much as Octopath 2 has. There's something here for everyone, and it makes me question how in the world, if we get another game, will it compare to this? And I know I've spent a lot of time on the music so far, but I can't stress enough just how much this part alone means to me, and I hope I've been able to express why. As a game though, Octopath 2 does exceed where the first game failed. I've talked about games in the past that if a sequel comes out, how it might invalidate the first game to me. To use Assassin's Creed 2 for a second, I've always said since finishing that game to start the series with that one and not 1, because the improvements to the formula that game made the original not worth playing in my eyes. Octopath 2 achieves the same effect. It takes everything from the first game, trim what doesn't, and doubles down on what does. The world is much more connected, the stories now intertwine more, and the cast actually acknowledge each other. While in battle, they'll comment if one of them is in trouble or if they break an enemy or something. There's side stories that bring two characters together and it's all voiced, which may not sound like a lot, but to me it brings these characters to life and really highlights their relationships. Jobs have been reworked to where it doesn't feel as much of a grind to not only unlock abilities, but also to level up. Look, I love classic JRPGs like Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest. There's a limit to how much I like to grind, and Octopath 1 was way too far in my opinion. Octopath 2 trims that down so much to where it doesn't feel anywhere near as noticeable. There are still some parts where you can grind, but it's only a couple of levels and not like 10 to 15 like it was in the original. The only time it got annoying was a couple of times where it says you might want to be a recommended level, but it's just a cutscene, and that could have been handled better. Combat has been fine fine-tuned so perfectly that I can easily say that Octopath 2 is my favorite job-based JRPG I've ever played. Battles and animations have been sped up perfectly to where even playing on the Switch doesn't feel like battles are taking forever. Limit breaks have been introduced for every character, and all of them can play into a build that you want to make for them. There's so much customization that you can do with every character. You want to make the mage character a fighter? With the right equipment and abilities, you can make it work, and it doesn't feel like a pain to do. I've seen people take Hikari, the physical DPS character, and make him a mage that can dish out just as much damage. The new jobs like Inventor, which I just call Machinist after 14, is one of my favorite new jobs. It's so versatile as a DPS for normal trash, and is great at support. They also fixed Hunter. I didn't hate Hanette, but I really didn't like how her abilities worked. 2 now makes the monsters you tame much more versatile, and on top of that, they have unlimited uses. This alone makes it one of my favorite jobs in the game. Easily though, my favorite one is Merchant. Mix this up with Agnia, and she becomes one of the best supports I've ever seen in an RPG. This is one of those few games that I went out of my way to fight every single super boss just because the customization was so good. Hell, with the right setup, you can absolutely decimate the final boss like I did. This is one of those RPGs that you will hear about for years to come. Games like Golden Sun, Final Fantasy 6 and 7, Chrono Trigger that come out and leave a mark on the genre, I feel as if Octopath 2 was able to do that and then some. I have very few things I'd like to see changed if there ever was an Octopath 3. Mainly just bring in some quality of life options that games like Bravely Default have, and have every plot tie into the overall story, because there are very few stories in 2 that don't feel like they tie to the overall plot, but they're still good in their own way. If there's been one game in 2023 I've been obsessed with getting people to play, it's been Octopath 2. Hell, in my character profile for 14, it just says go play Octopath 2. I do wonder if I've ever gotten someone to play from doing that. Anyway, Octopath 2, just play it, please. I really hope at some point in the future we can get another game from Team Asano, because this game is so near perfection, I want more. First honorable mention has to go to Baldur's Gate 3. I know a lot of people are going to put this as their favorite game this year, and you know what? It totally deserves it. I have never played a single game of D&D, Divinity Original Sin, or any game made by Larian Studio, but thanks to word of mouth and seeing the game in action, it at least did get me curious, and I did try it out. Western developed games and me don't always mix. It's not due to a bias, but I've just had more times where it doesn't work out than times it has, but Baldur's Gate 3 was one of those times it did. This game is so well crafted with its choices and storytelling that alone is impressive to me. But on a technical level, the game is so much deeper than that. This is one of those games, if you can dream it, you can likely do it. I love hearing stories about how people got past a challenge or combat encounter by doing the most crazy thing you can think of, and it just works. On top of having such a diverse cast like Asterion, Shadowheart, and Karlach being my personal favorites, I didn't finish it though because after putting about 40 hours into it, I finished Act 2 and felt like I missed a lot in that section, and I didn't want to replay a game up to that point again. I understand that this game is meant to be played over and over again, but that's where I wish it was just a bit shorter to make it easier to get back to that point. That's really my only gripe with the game, honestly. I may get back to it eventually, but I can totally see the appeal, and I hope those who played it enjoyed every second of it.
Time to party like it's 2023.
Next is one I would put on the list, but because the game originally didn't come out in 2023, I didn't want to go through with it, even though you could say the game finally came out the way it should have, and that's Cyberpunk 2077. I didn't care at all about this game when it was being shown throughout the years and leading up to its release. And when the whole controversy happened with 1.0, I just thought, oh well. Then throughout this year, I started seeing some friends play the game and started seeing them really get into it, and it wasn't looking like a complete glitchy mess. So I bought the game, and it just sat in my backlog for a little bit, but after finally finishing Mario Wonder, I decided to hop in, and I got it. The world design in this game is something else. I loved Night City as a whole and getting to see how everything fit together. Some of the side characters had full-on side stories that just felt like DLC expansions, but it's all part of the main game, which blew my mind. Just like Baldur's Gate 3, this game is a role-player experience where you have so many options on how you want to build V and how you want them to interact with the world around them. I also took this chance to play Phantom Liberty, which was fantastic, delivering a story on par with the base game, even surpassing it in some areas. I just didn't like Dogtown as much as Night City. I'm planning at some point in the future to go back and replay this game again, and instead of doing a Netrunner build, I'm thinking of doing a pure melee and heavy weapon character. Cyberpunk is totally worth getting out, and hey, check out Edge Runners 2. It's a great anime that complements the game. Last honorable mention is Ghost Trick Phantom Detective. I'm a huge Ace Attorney fan, and this is one of those games that I kept hearing about throughout the years, but never got a chance to play. With the remaster finally out, I finally got a chance to, and yep, it's just as good as people made it out to be. Shu Takumi sure doesn't miss, and with an OST composed by the same composer as Ace Attorney 1, you get a great soundtrack which landed in my top 5 of this year. I've heard a lot of people say that this is Shu Takumi's best game, and while I definitely wouldn't say it's bad by any means, I think the plot gets a little bit needlessly complicated towards the end. It's easy enough to understand, but it just seems a little weird when you're already playing as a ghost that can possess objects and time travel. Regardless of that, the story was worth it, and yeah, I did cry at the ending. If you like great mystery puzzle games like Raincoat or Professor Layton, I think you'll find something here too you'll like. Yeah, if it wasn't obvious at the start, my game of the year is easily Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. I know it may sound cliche to say at this point, but Tears is seriously one of the greatest games I've ever played. In 2017, Breath of the Wild gave me an experience I never had with a game before. The world was just so amazing to explore and traverse that I've replayed that game so many times since then and still cherish it to this day. So when Tears got announced, I was like, how in the world are they going to compete with this behemoth of a game? When the game was first shown off, I was pretty excited, but I just thought, yeah, it's Breath of the Wild again. But with each new trailer, my opinion quickly began to change. From there, I was back on the hype train like no other since Breath came out. There have been very few games I've been as excited for as much as Tears. And then finally, when it came time for the game to release, I went to the midnight launch and bought every single piece of merch I could get, and then spent the next 4 days locked away playing this game non-stop. From morning to night, I would explore Hyrule with just the bare minimum amount of sleep. By the end of day 5, I had clocked in over 100 hours, which is insane for me. As an adult, I don't always get to have as much free time to invest in a game like this, and on top of that, not get burned out. But Tears was giving me an experience just like how Breath of the Wild and Endwalker did when those games came out, at the perfect time for me just to get invested into the world and story, to where after I beat the game, I felt that was one of the best journeys I'd ever been on. After finishing all the shrines and depths mapped out, I still felt like I hadn't even gotten through half the game's content. There's so much in this game to do and explore that it completely baffles me how Nintendo was able to take the same map from 2017 and almost triple it in size and just give us a few new abilities, and it all feels fresh again. Just like with Baldur's Gate 3, I feel like this is one of those games that when you see it in action and look at it from a technical level, it's like, how in the world were they able to make this game, especially on hardware that's pretty outdated by this point? And it looks as good as it does. Just being able to overcome any challenge the way you want to. And even if you're not the most intuitive person out there, this game is very good at giving you hints as to what you may be able to interact with to help get past the situation. The shrines in particular are just so good. I've replayed this game a couple of times throughout the year just for fun, and they are so well designed, and seeing how people have solved them never gets old. I mentioned earlier that the map is the same as Breath of the Wild, but it just doesn't feel the same. There's new ways to get around, and you can walk around more parts of Hyrule on horseback like Death Mountain, which is something I really wanted to do in Breath. And oh man, the first time going to the depths legitimately freaked me out. I gotta give it to Nintendo that throughout Tears' marketing, there was very little shown of this place, and it's the same size as the map above. It's like, how in the world did they hide that? One of the reasons I can't deal well with horror games is due to the unease that I feel in dark spaces, and guess what the depths are? Nothing but darkness and the unknown as far as the eye can see. But you know what? I actually liked exploring this place, and as much as it made me uneasy, I explored the entire map. I used to think the sea hats from Wind Waker was the scariest thing in the series, but then Tears comes in with not only the depths, but also these creepy hands that just come up, and I'm just like, nope, 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 nope. I also have to mention the dungeons. They finally got this part right. I didn't mind the ones in Breath, but now these feel like proper Zelda dungeons that can be done in the style of this gameplay, even if the idea is similar with collecting 5 keys. The build up to all of them is also very well done. I love how the new champions of that region will join Link as you make your way to the dungeon itself. And my god, the bosses too. Pretty much every boss was an improvement from Breath. They all have unique designs, and my favorite part is being able to team up with a person to take them on. One idea I've wanted Zelda to incorporate is a more connected world. The last time to my knowledge that a character followed you around in a dungeon was Spirit Tracks, but here they'll actively help you in combat and during boss fights. This is not only an idea I want more in Zelda games, but just open world games in general, where you have citizens in the overworld or in dungeons that will help Link because they know the danger of the situation that's going on in the world. Also, I really want to talk about this final boss sequence. So I guess Nintendo wanted to make up for how easy Hyrule Castle felt in Breath and decided to literally throw everything at you, plus the kitchen sink, plus the bathroom as you make your way to Ganondorf. The way the music builds as you descend into the depths, and when the champions join you for the final battle, oh my god, yes! This is what I'm wanting in a Zelda game and just more games in general. The big bad needs to be stopped, so everyone is giving it their all, leading to what I think is a much better final boss than the one in Breath. Ganondorf tests your abilities the way a final boss should and can counter you the same way you can counter him. But then after defeating him, you think that's it, and we get, in my opinion, the best final boss moment in all of Zelda, getting to fight Dragon Ganon with Zelda helping in the skies above all of Hyrule. Is this a dream come true? Because this scale and idea in a Zelda game is something I experienced in Final Fantasy a couple times, but never in Zelda, a series I love with my entire heart and soul, and we're getting to play a section like this. I don't care if this part is easy. This blew my mind more than any other moment in 2023, and to top it all off, we get the last catch sequence, which genuinely made me cry because of how beautiful this moment is. Getting to write the failure at the beginning of the game with the music playing Zelda's lullaby on top of Tears' main theme, it's just so good. Nintendo, how? How did you take all of this from Breath, expand it to this degree in scope that I never thought we'd get in this series? I've heard people say that Tears is Breath of the Wild DLC, and I'm just honestly like, what DLC has expanded a game to this scale? That's not a jab at anyone, I'm just genuinely curious at how they managed to make Breath look like a beta test for what I consider not to be just the best game of 2023, but even surpass Breath of the Wild as my favorite game of all time. Aonuma has confirmed that the next Zelda game won't be to this scale or in this gameplay style. They've said that they've done every idea that they could think of, and I can see what they mean. Honestly, I don't know what they could add except for maybe a proper vehicle to explore the sky with. The only thing I wish this game did a bit more was embrace Zelda's lore and connect back to Breath. The Zelda timeline has always been one of my favorite theory discussions, but at the same time, I'm also willing just to accept that these games take so far in the future that everything that's come before it has been lost to time. Also, can the next game have an original villain again? I loved Ganondorf, but he doesn't hit the same way the Malice did from the first game. But I digress. As long as they're able to give us a story that I can genuinely get behind and gameplay to match it, I know this series won't be getting stale anytime soon. And that's it. That may have been predictable, but seriously, there were just so many good games that released in 2023 that I'm sure I missed some. So if there's any that you think I should have played, please be sure to let me know in the comments below. As I said in the beginning, I'm hoping to stick around a bit more this time, and I'm also looking to start streaming soon. But that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time.